The first couple of pieces that I just played was by a composer named Domenico Scarlatti, and lived back in the 1700s, and was a very prolific composer. He wrote about 600 of those little sonatas, what they call sonatas, back in the 1700s. And they're, as you can see, they're very short pieces, but again, they're all very, very inventive. All 600 of them. I only played maybe 10 or 12 at the most, but it's a great part of the repertoire. The next section, though, of the program is, in a way, this composer almost needs no introduction, because he's certainly one of the most famous composers of the 19th century, and certainly for that instrument, for the piano. No one wrote for the piano like Frédéric Chopin. Some of you perhaps know a little bit about his life story, but unfortunately he did not live a long life, but a very eventful life and a traumatic life, especially when he left his native country, which was in Poland at the time, and left for Paris in order to study music. And while he was there, the Russians actually moved into Poland and took that over. And so for the rest of Chopin's life, he could never actually go back home. And if you can imagine what that, you know, the impact of that, to be in exile for your entire life, again, because of the kind of restrictions that they put on the country at the time, and people like Chopin and writers, et cetera, were put in jail, and so it was not a good time to go back to his native country. So in many ways, some of the music that Chopin wrote has a kind of a sad, melancholy quality to it, but he was a child prodigy. He was writing pieces of music that nobody could play other than Chopin when he was 18, 19 years old. And the first piece on the program, on this part of the program, the Ballade number 1, he wrote when he was 23 years old. And it is the essence of Romanticism. It's a ballad most of us know is something that tells a story. We don't know exactly what this story is, but you can hear it. Whatever that story is, you can make up your own, because it's a real roller coaster ride. It starts off with a very kind of gentle waltz, very sad kind of a waltz, but it just unfolds in very dramatic ways throughout the piece, almost like it's telling a story with a very tragic ending at the end. The second piece in this group, the Nocturne, Chopin actually invented this form of the Nocturne, and it is the essence of Romanticism in that it's a very short piece, it's a mood piece, and in many cases these nocturnes are very dreamy, but also have some very dramatic moments in them, and you'll see that in this particular selection, the Nocturne at F major. And then finally, this last piece on this section of the program, the Scherzo number 3 in C sharp minor, really points out the fact that Chopin was such a virtuoso. This is one of the most virtuosic pieces that he wrote. Chopin was not he didn't perform a whole lot in his lifetime. He didn't really like to perform in front of people. And yet he wrote some music that was extremely virtuosic, and again, very, very dramatic. And also, this one has a little bit of a tie into the next segment of the program, which is all Spanish music. And at this point, when Chopin wrote the Scherzo number 3, he actually took a trip to Mallorca, which is an island off the coast of Spain. And he went there for his health, because he was not in good health at the time. He had tuberculosis. And so he went there because it's supposedly sunny, and it was a place where he could get some fresh air, etc. And unfortunately, when he got there, and almost as soon as he got there, it started raining, and which was not good for his health. So he lived there for about a year in that circumstance, and he had a hard time finding a place to live. He ended up moving into an old monastery that had a leaky roof, and apparently it leaked, and it was wet, and it was damp. And something about this particular piece, first of all, that it occurs in Spain, is the connection with the next part of the program. But the fact that you can hear almost in there's a kind of a chorale-like tune in the third scherzo that has these intermittent, almost cascades of sound that's going from the upper part of the piano to the lower range of the piano. That almost sounds like kind of rain falling. So you can almost imagine him living in that monastery. And again, a very, very dramatic piece to end this part of the section of Frédéric Chopin. This next group of composers, really with the exception of one, and that's Lecuona, who's a Cuban composer. All the rest of these composers I'm about to play are from Spain. And I don't know if any of you have ever been to Spain, but those of you who know anything about the country, it's very diverse. There are lots of different regions of Spain, and each region has their own kind of unique music and also culture in general, which makes it a very unique country to visit. These particular composers, as a matter of fact, the first one I'm going to play, the Serenata Andaluza by Manuel de Falla, was written in, this particular piece was written in 1900, so most of these pieces were written in the early part of the 20th century. This particular one, de Falla was very much influenced by the composer I just got through playing. Chopin in particular, the nocturnes, that middle piece that I played, de Falla was very much influenced by that. In this piece, the Serenata Andalucia is the southern part of Spain. It's more the Mediterranean part. Sunny, and it's where bullfighting came from, and a very colorful part of Spain. But this particular one, it's a serenade, which implies kind of again a slower piece, a more melodic piece, but again very much influenced by the nocturnes of Chopin, but still using some of the folk melodies from the Andalusian region of Spain. The three Spanish dances that follow, the Minueto and the Oriental, were written by one of the most famous Spanish composers, Enrique Granados. And these are the most famous. He wrote 12 Spanish dances, and they're probably some of his most well-known works. I'm only going to do 2 of those. But Granados is a very prolific composer, but unfortunately his life was cut short. He actually was in this country conducting an opera that he'd written in the Metropolitan in New York. And on his way back, he and his wife, this was in 1916, and he and his wife were on a ship. He actually played for Woodrow Wilson, and he actually didn't catch the ship that would take him back to Spain, so he had to take another ship that would take him to London, or to England, and then to Spain. But on the way over there, he was attacked by a German submarine, his boat, and the boat was sunk, and he and his wife both drowned at that point. So unfortunately, his life was cut very, very short, but a very talented composer that wrote lots of very colorful dances that were taken from throughout really the various regions of Spain. And again, Spanish music again has that kind of a rhythmic flavor. I think you'll recognize it in many of these pieces. It makes it wonderful music to listen to. And then the Seguidillas by Isaac Albéniz. You know, a great example of when we think about Spanish music, so often we think about guitar music. And I think, as a matter of fact, I think we were hearing some Spanish guitar music on the way when you came in the theater tonight. But that is kind of the quintessential instrument for so much Spanish music. And this particular piece, the Seguidillas, as a matter of fact, you hear transcriptions for either the piano or the guitar, and you'll hear a lot of music in that particular piece that again sounds like guitar strumming and etc. So it works well on the piano or the guitar. And then finally, Ernesto Lecuona, who is a Cuban composer, a little bit later than the rest of these. The Gitanerías that I'll play as part of the Spanish dance group, and also the Malagueño, which is one of his most famous works, and I think you'll recognize it as soon as you hear it if you're not familiar with the name. He sort of did for Cuban music what George Gershwin did for American jazz. He kind of brought a lot of Cuban folk music sort of into the classical arena, and that's primarily what he's known for. But love the Spanish music. It's very colorful and very rhythmic and fun to play. So I hope you enjoy this last group.